If you enjoy Wild West romances filled with secrets, longing, and heart-stopping moments, then saddle up for this tale. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment about what you'd do if you were in Mary Lou's boots, and subscribe so you never miss the next Wild West love story. Now, let's ride straight into the opening chapter. The Texas horizon bled orange and crimson as the sun sank low, painting long shadows across the McGraw Ranch. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and horses, dust swirling around the corrals where cowboys hollered and cracked whips. In the center of it all, Colt McGraw reigned. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and weathered by the land he commanded, a man whose wealth was written in acres of pasture and thousands of head of cattle. Yet beneath his commanding presence, there simmered a disquiet, a suspicion he could not easily shake. For years, Colt had been surrounded by people drawn to his gold pocket watch, his sprawling house, and the promise of a name tied to power. He had been courted by women bold enough to stride right up to him with painted smiles, whispering words that sounded sweet but tasted hollow. What Colt craved was truth, honesty stripped bare, loyalty unclouded by greed. And now, he found himself watching a young woman who seemed too timid, too gentle, too quiet to be anything but genuine. Mary Lou Harper had joined the household only 3 weeks before. A maid by necessity, she came from a family who had lost their farm after her father's illness drained their savings. She was no ranch beauty with bold laughter and striking clothes. Her plain calico dress and the way she kept her head lowered told everyone she was not one for attention. Yet when she spoke, her voice was soft as rain against the roof, carrying a warmth that lingered. Colt noticed how she bent her shoulders when others passed, as if to make herself smaller, and how she flushed scarlet when anyone addressed her directly. It was this quietness that drew Colt's interest. She worked tirelessly, polishing the heavy oak tables, hauling buckets from the well, sweeping floors until they gleamed. He had caught her once humming a hymn while dusting the parlor shelves, unaware that he lingered in the doorway. It wasn't the work itself that struck him, it was the way she poured herself into it, with a care that seemed less about duty and more about devotion. Still, questions gnawed at him. Did her meekness hide a different hunger? Was she like the others, waiting for a chance to touch his silver-trimmed revolver or slip coins into her apron? Or was she truly the rare soul who could look past the gleam of wealth? Colt decided he could no longer leave the matter to wonder. That evening, as lantern light flickered across the ranch house walls, Colt confided in his foreman Jed. Jed was a wiry man with a face as lined as old saddle leather, his loyalty proven through years of friendship. Colt leaned against the doorframe of the bunkhouse, arms crossed, eyes narrowed with intent. "I'm gonna put her to the test," Colt said. Jed spat into the dirt, shaking his head. "Ain't right, tricking a girl that way. If she's honest, she don't deserve suspicion. And if she ain't, well, you'll know soon enough without playing games." Colt's jaw tightened. "I need to know, Jed. Every soul on this ranch is tied to me one way or another. If I can't trust the one closest under my roof, then what's the worth of all this?" Jed studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "You'll do what you're set on doing. Just don't come crying if you don't like what you find." And so Colt set his plan. That night, after the house had grown still, he positioned himself in the parlor. He lowered into the leather chair near the fireplace, hat tipped low, boots stretched out, as if exhaustion had taken him after a long day's ride. On the table beside him, he placed the instruments of temptation, a glinting gold pocket watch, his revolver polished to a gleam, and a roll of bills thick enough to draw even the most disciplined eye. Then he slowed his breathing, steady as a man in slumber, and waited. The house creaked with the settling of timbers. Somewhere upstairs, a door shut softly. The faint scent of soap drifted down the hallway. Then, at last, came the sound he had been waiting for, the light tread of footsteps, hesitant yet purposeful, padding closer to the parlor. Mary Lou appeared in the doorway, clutching a rag and a small tin of polish. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Colt slumped in the chair. She froze for a moment, uncertain, glancing toward the table where the valuables gleamed in lantern light. Her hand tightened around the rag, and for a heartbeat Colt wondered if she might retreat altogether. Instead, she took a careful step inside. Her shoes made barely a sound against the wood floor as she edged into the room, her gaze flicking between the cowboy and the glitter of his possessions. She set her supplies down slowly, almost reverently, as though the silence itself demanded respect. Colt's pulse thudded in his ears, though outwardly he remained still, every muscle locked in the pretense of sleep. He watched through slitted lashes, fighting the urge to stir, to break the spell. Mary Lou moved closer, her breath shallow. She lingered beside the table, eyes resting on the roll of bills. Her fingers trembled, not reaching, simply hovering as though caught between temptation and restraint. She drew in a shaky breath, then turned her gaze to Colt's face, studying him with a softness he had never seen directed at himself before. Her lips parted, as if she meant to speak, but no sound came. Instead, she stepped closer still, standing so near he could feel the faint warmth of her presence. Colt's heart hammered, and he fought the instinct to open his eyes, to catch her in whatever truth she was about to reveal. She set the rag down gently on the arm of his chair. Her hand hovered, shaking slightly as it edged nearer his hat, nearer the curve of his brow. For one endless moment, Colt thought she might finally give in to greed, pluck the watch, the revolver, the money. But her fingers drifted not to the table, but toward him. She leaned in close enough that he caught the whisper of her breath. The room held its silence, every sound in the world swallowed by that fragile instant. Colt McGraw, rich cowboy, proud master of the land, sat frozen in feigned slumber, about to discover the truth of the shy maid he thought he had judged. And as Mary Lou bent toward him, her hand trembling in the firelight, Colt's pulse quickened with a question he could no longer control. What would she do now that she believed herself unseen? Mary Lou's hand hovered in the air, trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. Her eyes lingered on the cowboy's face, the firelight painting his strong jaw in shades of amber and shadow. For an instant, she seemed on the verge of retreat, as though she had wandered too far into forbidden ground. Yet something in her softened, and with the gentlest touch she brushed a stray strand of dark hair from his brow. Colt fought the urge to flinch, every nerve sparking as though her fingers carried lightning. She lingered there, staring down at him with a tenderness he had never imagined might be directed his way. "You look so tired, Mr. McGraw," she whispered, her voice so quiet it might have been mistaken for the settling of the rafters. "Always carry in the weight of this place on your shoulders." Her hand slipped away, yet her eyes did not leave him. She shifted, kneeling beside the chair as if drawn by something stronger than reason. "If only I were braver," she murmured, each word barely more than a breath. "I'd tell you how I feel. But what chance does a maid have with a man like you?" Colt's chest tightened, and though he kept his eyes closed, he felt the truth of her words like a spur pressing into his ribs. She hadn't reached for his money, nor even glanced at the revolver gleaming on the table. What she reached for was something far more dangerous to him, the part of himself he kept guarded from all others. Her voice wavered as she continued, unaware of his ruse. "I see how the others look at you, how the women in town paint their lips and try to catch your eye. But I could never compete with them. I ain't bold or pretty like they are. Still, every time you speak to me, every time you so much as nod my way, I feel like I matter. And I wish I mattered to you." Her confession hung in the stillness, fragile as glass. Colt's heart thundered. He had expected her to falter before temptation, to prove herself like so many others had, greedy for what his name carried. Instead, she had revealed a longing deeper and purer than anything he had known. Mary Lou rose slowly, but she did not leave. Instead, she glanced at the window, noting the chill of the night pressing through the glass. With quiet resolve, she crossed the room, fetched a folded blanket from the cedar chest, and returned to drape it carefully over his shoulders. The gesture was so tender, so instinctive, that Colt nearly broke his disguise then and there. But he held fast, lips pressed shut, breath steady. She stood for a long moment, gazing down at him. Her eyes glistened in the firelight, as though holding back tears. "Good night, Mr. McGraw," she whispered, her voice soft with yearning. Then she gathered her rag and polish, slipping silently from the room, her footsteps fading into the hush of the hall. The moment the door closed, Colt's eyes snapped open. He sat upright, the blanket slipping into his lap. His hands clenched the armrests of the chair, and for the first time in years he felt truly unmoored. The gold, the revolver, the bills, all lay untouched, exactly as he had left them. Yet something within him had shifted, as though his whole world had been turned on end. Jed appeared in the doorway, drawn by the creak of the chair. His brows rose as he took in Colt's shaken expression. "Well? What happened?" Colt rubbed a hand over his face, still feeling the ghost of her touch. "She didn't take a thing," he said hoarsely. "Not a coin, not a glance at the pistol. She just spoke. Told me what was in her heart." Jed's eyes narrowed, skeptical. "And what was that?" Colt looked up, his gaze burning with the weight of revelation. "She don't want my money, Jed. She wants me. And she's been hiding it all this time, thinking she ain't worthy." Jed leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And what are you planning to do with that knowledge?" Colt's hand tightened around the edge of the chair. "I reckon I've spent too long thinking my wealth was a curse, drawing only the greedy. Tonight I found proof that someone sees me past all that. And I'll be damned if I let her keep believing she ain't enough." Jed steadied him, then gave a slow nod. "Then you'd best tread careful. A girl like that, she's nothing like the rest. If you go to her, you go honest." Colt stood, pulling the blanket from his shoulders, his decision burning clearer than ever. He strode to the window, staring out at the moonlit fields stretching across his land. His wealth no longer weighed on him the same way. For the first time, he felt it might be worth something if it led him to the one person who cared for him without it. He placed his hat back on his head, eyes fierce. "Tomorrow," he said, more to himself than to Jed, "I'll give her the answer she deserves." And with that vow, the parlor fell silent again, though Colt's heart still beat hard, carrying him into the night with a resolve he could no longer ignore. Dawn spread across the McGraw Ranch in pale gold, the first rays of sunlight gilding the dewy fields and warming the wooden beams of the great house. The morning bustle was underway, cowhands calling to one another, horses stamping impatiently at the corral, chickens scratching near the porch steps. Amid the rhythm of ranch life, Mary Lou Harper moved quietly, her presence as unassuming as a shadow. She carried a basket of linens to the line, her gaze fixed firmly on her work, though her mind replayed the foolish words she had whispered the night before. Her cheeks burned with shame. She had spoken her heart in the presence of a man she believed asleep, bearing feelings she had kept locked away. Had she truly brushed his brow, lingered at his side like some love-struck girl in a storybook? The memory gnawed at her, and she resolved to avoid him at all costs. Better to fade back into the silence of servitude than to risk the humiliation of discovery. But Colt McGraw was not a man to be avoided. He emerged from the stables, broad shoulders dusted with straw, his steps purposeful. His eyes, usually cool and guarded, followed Mary Lou with a sharpness that made her hands tremble on the clothespins. She felt his presence before she dared glance up, and when she finally did, her breath caught. He was coming straight for her. "Miss Harper," he said, his deep voice carrying easily over the morning din. She stiffened, the pen snapping in her hand. "Why, yes, sir." He stopped a step away, close enough that the scent of leather and horse surrounded her. His hat shadowed his eyes, but she could see the intensity in them, steady and unyielding. "We need to talk." Her stomach twisted. She knew, or thought she knew, what was coming, her dismissal. A man like him would not tolerate a maid daring to whisper foolish affections over his sleeping form. She braced herself, clutching the basket to her chest like a shield. "If I've offended you, sir, I swear it weren't my intention. Please, forgive me. I'll gather my things and be gone." Colt's jaw tightened, and for a moment he simply studied her, as though weighing every word she had spoken. Then, with a sharp shake of his head, he stepped closer. "You think I brought you out here to send you away?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. "I was awake last night, Mary Lou," he said evenly. "I heard every word. I felt your hand brush my face. I know what you confessed when you thought I couldn't hear." The basket nearly slipped from her arms. Her face went pale, then flushed crimson. She wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Lord above, she whispered. I've made a fool of myself. Colt reached out and steadied the basket with one large hand, the gesture firm but gentle. No, Mary Lou. You showed me more truth in a few whispered words than most folks have ever dared give me in years. Her eyes filled with confusion, and she shook her head. But I'm just a maid. You're a man of wealth and standing. The whole county looks up to you. If anyone knew what I'd said, what you're saying now, they'd laugh at the thought of us. Colt's eyes burned, the steel in them softened by something deeper. Let him laugh. I don't give a damn what folks think. I've spent half my life surrounded by people who see only what I own. Last night I learned there's one soul in this world who sees me. Just me. And that soul is you. Her breath caught as he took her hands from the basket, holding them firmly between his calloused palms. She felt the roughness of his skin, the warmth of his grip, and the strength of a man who had built his empire with his own sweat. His voice dropped low, carrying the weight of promise. I've been blind, Mary Lou, blind to what was right in front of me. But I ain't blind anymore. Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to fight them back. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me prove it, he answered swiftly. Say you'll stop thinking you ain't enough. Because you are. You're more than enough. For the first time, she lifted her chin fully, meeting his gaze without lowering her eyes. The vulnerability in her face was raw, but so too was the flicker of courage awakening there. You truly stand by me, Colt McGraw? Even if people whispered and wagged their tongues? He leaned in, his voice fierce with conviction. I'd stand by you against the whole damn world. The space between them vanished as he pulled her gently but firmly into his arms. The kiss that followed was not tentative, it was the joining of two souls who had circled each other in silence for too long. Mary Lou melted against him, her fears dissolving in the heat of his embrace. The world around them, the busy ranch, the whispering wind, the judging eyes of others, fell away until there was only the thunder of their hearts beating as one. A cheer rang out from nearby, startling Mary Lou as she pulled back in embarrassment. Several ranch hands had paused in their work, grinning broadly at the sight of their boss kissing the shy maid. Colt only laughed, unashamed, holding her close. Let him see, he said. I want the whole ranch to know. This here woman is mine, if she'll have me. Mary Lou's tears spilled freely now, but they carried no sorrow, only the release of years of fear and longing. She nodded, her voice breaking as she whispered, yes. I'll have you. The ranch hands erupted into more cheers, some tipping their hats, others clapping one another on the back. The morning sun blazed brighter, casting its light across the two figures locked in a promise neither wealth nor gossip could tarnish. In that moment, Colt McGraw knew that his riches no longer lay in land or cattle or the gleam of a gold watch. His true fortune stood before him in calico and quiet courage, her heart richer than any treasure. And Mary Lou Harper, the maid who had once tried to make herself invisible, now found herself at the center of a love so fierce and unshakable it could not be hidden. The shy maid had become the cowboy's world, and the cowboy, in turn, had become hers. The wind swept across the ranch, carrying with it a new beginning. What had started as a test of honesty had ended in the discovery of love, unexpected, undeniable, and everlasting.